Let's talk about compliance just before lunch, because we love it.
Yeah.
Ron, thanks for being here today. I wanted to talk about AI, because that's the theme of the day, but more importantly, I wanted to talk about AI as to why do HCP and patients demand it. We've all heard that we move from Dr. Google to Dr. ChatGPT, where we also want to go beyond the technology as to why AI is very helpful. And I think it's this notion of hyper-personalization. People want a lot more personal experience with their brand, with pretty much everything they touch, from Netflix all the way to eventually their life science brand. And Agentic is excellent in that field because it can organize that information and summarize it specifically for the patient need or for the HCP need. Today, I'd like to discuss how we implemented an Agentic-facing interface at iNova that was for a prescription, and it was patient-facing. When we understand the promise of it, what was your role as head of compliance in implementing it, and what attracted you and scared you in putting in an Agentic systems that was patient-facing?
Yeah, thanks, Romain. So I guess as a starting point, when we talk about compliance, we're really talking about risk, how we measure risk, and how we mitigate risk. And arguably, the biggest risk in AI at the moment is a lack of trust, and that follows the theme that we've seen earlier on, within the pharmaceutical industry generally. So we see this every week with, in the news, instances where AI has gone a little bit rogue. And there's surveys, and there was a recent one done by KPMG where they showed that nearly 50% of respondents cited that a lack of trust in AI was a major barrier for adoption, and it was a major reason why they didn't want to, or the respondents didn't want to interact with AI. And so there were how's this being solved, I guess, on the AI side? And what we're seeing is what are effectively compliance tools that are really coming to the forefront to try and solve these problems. And somebody earlier mentioned, using a verified database of sources to ground AI, with retrieval augmented generation, and to make sure that, or to reduce the instance of hallucination. We're also seeing things like AI impact assessments that organisations are carrying out to measure the risk and the harm and to document how they're guarding against that. And then within agentic systems, we're seeing some really interesting, what are effectively compliance tools like AI juries, verification agents using scorecards to really assess decision-making quality of these systems and to assure against misalignment. And so I think it's really interesting because what we're seeing now is that particularly within AI, these tools are building trust, and compliance is no longer being seen as a blocker or a barrier to adoption. It's actually a trust enabler.
I'm hallucinating hearing this. Literally a year and a half ago, it would have been impossible to go through compliance. So the idea that it's actually an enabler is very good. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what you liked seeing from the team, specifically around transparency, explainability, and a little bit about the speed by which you've been able to roll out that technology for your various campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as a starting point, it's difficult as a compliance professional to explain and ultimately defend what you don't understand. So transparency with our vendors was absolutely key, and making sure that we had the right people in the room at the right time, so that from a compliance perspective, we had an audit trail that allowed us to explain, monitor and manage the outputs, and to ensure that we understood what the AI tool was actually doing. And so that basically led to us having quite a bit of confidence in and reassurance that what the AI tool was supposed to be doing when nobody was watching was the right thing.
And it was specifically around making sure that it was presenting information at all stage and not promoting needlessly, and ensuring that we were always on the side of disease awareness. Similarly, we use the same systems for HCP facing.
Yeah.
But could you go a little bit more on the speed by which, I mean, we know traditionally before using Agentic, we used to take, quarters to implement programs. How quickly were we able to go to market by having a very transparent approach where you guys were aware of what data was going into the training engine, which was the API we were using for the actual intelligence aspect, and the harness that we put around the pharmacovigilance to make sure that it wasn't hallucinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, to start with, I guess, the speed, what we're seeing now is that traditional AI deployments are not the same as your, also rather, AI deployments are not the same as your traditional IT deployments. They have traditionally and historically taken, 6, 9, 12 months, at least in my experience. And what we're seeing now is that AI is being deployed at speed. We're seeing AI tools that are hitting the market in 90 days, which is very, very impressive. But I think speed, to your point, doesn't mean skipping things. We are looking as, when we're reviewing these tools, from a compliance perspective, it's not just legal, it's regulatory, it's medical, it's pharmacovigilance, safety. It's making sure that we're hitting, all the right notes, and we're understanding what the system actually does, so that we can ensure that the guardrails that we're putting in place are as agile as the innovation that we're keeping pace with.
Let's talk a little bit more about the guardrails. We know of, pharmacovigilance is critical. We built bespoke agents to help you guys, making sure that pharmacovigilance was across all content. Can we dive a little deeper on what specifically you were doing and your team had to do to make sure that it was meeting and even beating expectation?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess one of the sort of secondary issues with AI is that it's so easy and intuitive to use that you kind of forget a little bit that the same obligations, whether from a regulatory perspective, a medical perspective, a legal perspective, privacy, compliance with things like, industry codes, legislation, the Australian consumer law, they all continue to apply. So it's important to make sure that you've got the right people in the right room who can input at the right time. And the only way that you can really do that is by partnering with, again, a transparent vendor who's able to allow you to be part of the design process, and really take a paint as you build approach, so that you're not having compliance as a holistic function coming in at the end and having to clean things up.
Brilliant. You talked about the team really enjoying testing the product and realizing the speed by which it was improving and continually learning. So it goes back to the earlier remark and saying that how this technology allows you to make sure that it betters and really narrows down on the personalization that your stakeholder is requiring. Could you anecdotally go about the speed of learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this was actually one of the most impressive things about, or one of the most impressive aspects about the entire project that we did, because we had just prior to deployment, we had a 4-day validation sprint, and what we were doing was we were looking to stress test the system and to check the quality of the outputs. So we were looking at how effectively we could break it. as you would in any kind of like real life testing. And so one of the things that it was, quite fascinating to see, and, one of our speakers earlier mentioned, fine tuning. As we were testing over that, that week, we could see the system getting better and better, and the quality of the outputs getting better and better. And as the model was refined, those outputs became stronger, they became more consistent, and we could see the system really learning its own boundaries throughout that week. And I think it was a really good example of a collaboration between enterprise and technology to really embed those design principles into the system itself.
No, it's fascinating because I think the industry produces a lot of material, whether it's on the HCP side or the patient side, and being able to orchestrate this material in real time and measuring its impact and iterate is really the key. And it interestingly brings us to ROI. Like, we think that not having an intelligent systems to serve this content is making the industry a bit blind about what works and doesn't work. And it's removing it from the ability to really service a personalized information engine to the stakeholder. So I wanted to go, so we talked about functional learning, talked about how effective the ROI gets. Let's hear a little bit about the future outlook. So I think about a year ago, we looked at Agentic and AI as being something that helped on clinical trials, helped on clinical decision making, but the idea that it would actually be helpful for your commercialization and how HCP and patients interact with your brand was a little foreign. How do you see it now that you run through this experience?
I mean, in terms of the future of AI, I
Yes.
think we are moving at an absolutely breakneck speed. There's innovation that's coming out every month. I think the incorporation of agentic workflows and even agentic workers into organizations is fairly inevitable. I think, in the short term, one of the things within the next year or two, we're going to see things like the EU AI Act, which has been fully deployed. We're going to see voluntary codes like the voluntary AI safety standards in Australia, but also industry best practice being legislated and made mandatory. And so what that means is that it's going to be a ticket to the table to have compliant AI operating systems rather than a nice to have. I think in the medium term, there's going to be a real focus on incorporating humans into decision making, particularly as AI becomes more customized and personalized. And by that, I don't mean that we've taken humans out and we're putting humans back in. What I mean is that we're going to see these systems being more attuned to when a human needs to be making a decision or reviewing a decision. And then longer term, I think, honestly, we're probably going to stop talking about compliance in AI almost altogether, because this is just how those systems will be built. They'll be built with compliance in mind. And so we'll end up in a future where I think the early winners will be those who are building trust and building a reliable systems that are creating that trust. So, but I mean, you've got a more of a panoramic view of the industry than I do. I mean, what do you see in terms of like the short term, the medium term, the long term outlook for AI?
I just see it as a technology that allows you to humanize interfacing. So people want more and more personalized journeys. They want to be taken care of. And AI, Agentic specifically, has the ability to humanize the way we interface. I think someone earlier today mentioned that we're losing the information war. Someone were talking about supplements, hijacking. We've seen that in some public health data. I think COVID put everyone online and everything online. So we're losing the information war when we as an industry own the clinical correctness. And I think AI will allow us to regain that edge, will allow us to better communicate the data that we know that has been paid as an industry extensively and present the right information. So I'm really excited because we're moving it from just being something cool to being something really important. How do we go and organize all this information that we have, serve it properly, track it to make sure that we have a positive ROI on all the activity we do. But yeah, we see it as very exciting future. But it is just a technology, like cloud was one, but I want to go back to a point as well, which was really interesting. We had earlier this morning. We always apprehensive putting new technology to compliance team and to MLR in general, because we know, as we've discussed this morning, there can be a break to innovation. This was the first time it was the other way around. You guys got very comfortable very quickly that the system was behaving properly because it had within it an agent that was constantly checking against Medicine Australia rules or whichever therapeutic field, etc. And so you guys got satisfied that this was information, not promotion, and compliant quite quickly. This was for us the biggest breakthrough. Like the idea that we could go to an MLR team and go, look how it works, here's how it is under the lead. This is what the information is being fed. And you guys coming back in weeks instead of months traditionally saying, yes, that's great, let's use it. That got us very emboldened. So,
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ron. We've got 2 minutes for questions, but I've noticed no one was doing questions this morning. Anyone has any questions specifically on implementing with MLR team? No, I'm conscious it's before lunch as well, so.
Yep.
How about
Need to manage that risk.
We get those 2 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone.